Just look at this explosion, the beauty and the beast. Look how magnificent it is, how much energy is released. What do you feel watching this nuclear mushroom? I look at it, and I must admit, although those nuclear mushroom clouds are marvelous and spectacular, they are horrendous in the same time, because they are so very deadly. And don't even think of looking at it without eye protection. Turn away or your eyes will burn out, because this blast is much brighter than the sun. Okay, as you already noticed, today's topic is a nuclear mass destruction arms race. It's going to be more history and my personal opinion about it, and less memories and experience. The nuclear arms race was a competition for supremacy in nuclear warfare between the United States, the Soviet Union, and their respective allies during the Cold War. And during the Cold War, in addition to the American and Soviet nuclear stockpiles, other countries also developed nuclear weapons, though none engaged in warhead production on nearly the same scale as those two superpowers. In the years immediately after the Second World War, the United States had monopoly on specific knowledge of raw materials for a nuclear weaponry, but secretly the Soviet regime was working on building their own atomic weapons. Participation in this nuclear competition was extremely mandatory, because if one side would decide to stay out of this race, it automatically means that the other superpower will have all means of destroying other nation without any fear of retaliation. It was interesting to me to collect information and find out new facts about nuclear race, and I truly hope you will enjoy my presentation. Only memories related to the nuclear race from me are civil protection classes in my primary school, and the constant nuclear threat feeling from news, radio, TV, etc. Our class were watching movie where nuclear blast destroyed city, flattened buildings, and studied how to act in case of nuclear and other mass destruction weapons attack. I remember I was watching a movie about start of nuclear war. I was really shocked how that blast swept away houses. Those who didn't manage to take a shelter were killed, and only skeletons left because flesh was burned off. I recalled I couldn't sleep at night after watching this movie. I was scared for real that someone can drop those nukes at any time at my city. Both Cold War era rival sides were living in the shadow of nuclear mushroom cloud. Quick retrospect in the past. Trinity was the code name of the first nuclear weapon test of an atomic bomb. This test was conducted by the United States Army on July 16, 1945. This date is usually considered to be the beginning of the atomic age. In the 1950s, both the United States and Soviet Union had nuclear power to obliterate the other side. Both sides developed a capability to launch a devastating attack even after sustaining a full assault from the other side, especially by means of submarines, and it's also called a second strike. The US and Russia keep hundreds of missiles armed with thousands of nuclear warheads on high alert 24 hours a day. They can be launched with only a few minutes warning and reach their targets in less than 30 minutes. For the reference, 5 nations are considered to be nuclear weapon states: the United States, Russia, successor of the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, France, and China. The first time an atomic bomb to be used as a weapon was in August 1945. 2 atomic bombs were dropped on 2 Japanese cities. The first bomb, Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima, and later the second, the Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. Almost 66 years have passed since the first nuclear attack on people. During this time there has been about 2,000 different nuclear thermal and H-bombs tests have performed, and you know what? It sucks, because now we have to live and breathe all this nuclear waste. damaging factors of nuclear explosion are blast wave, thermal radiation, heat, and nuclear radiation. The blast wave is traveling several times faster than sound, so you won't hear it. You will be crashed by shockwave first. Temperatures of tens of millions of degrees develop in the immediate area of nuclear detonation. At these temperatures, everything near ground zero vaporizes. If the fireball of nuclear detonation touches the earth, large amounts of soil water will be vaporized and drawn into the radioactive cloud, which will rise into the stratosphere and will be distributed globally, while the larger particles will settle on Earth. Nuclear detonation will create destructive EMP over hundreds of thousands of square kilometers beneath where the explosion occurs. Modern electronic chips and microprocessors present in the most communication equipment, TVs, radios, PCs, are extremely sensitive to these surges and will be immediately get burnt out. Basically, it means that after nuclear explosion you won't be able to play anything because your PC or console simply fry. I like how in Black Ops game they stick to the history, and in some maps such as Crisis you can observe some nuclear warheads in hangars. It is probably from that Cuban Missile Crisis period, which was a confrontation among the Soviet Union and Cuba from one side and the United States from the other side in October 1962 during the Cold War. It is generally regarded as a moment in which the Cold War came closest to turning into a nuclear conflict. It was important for both competitors not to only to develop nuclear mass destruction weapons, but also be able to deploy them as close as possible to the enemy's location. The most important development in terms of delivery in the 1950s was the introduction of intercontinental ballistic missiles. An intercontinental ballistic missile is a ballistic missile with a long range, typically larger than 3,500 miles, and designed for nuclear weapons delivery, and they can deliver one or more nuclear warheads. Due to their great range and firepower, in all-out nuclear war, land-based and submarine-based ballistic missiles would carry most of the destructive force, with nuclear-armed bombers having their remainder, and were potentially a more effective delivery system than strategic bombers. This period also saw some of the first attempts to defend against nuclear weapons. Both superpowers built large radar arrays to detect incoming bombers and missiles. Fighters to use against bombers and anti-ballistic missiles to use against intercontinental ballistic missiles were also developed. Large underground bunkers were constructed to save the leaders, and citizens were told to build fallout shelters and taught how to react to nuclear attack. These measurements were called civil defense. Finally, couple of words from me. My perspective on this matter, so to say. I'm not anti-war fanboy. Every nation needs weapons to defend themselves and make enemies to respect them. But to my mind, making nuclear weapons is great waste of human labor and resources, and it's completely useless. It's futile, it's non-productive. Governments spend massive amounts to increase the quality and quantity of their nuclear arsenal. The cash which is spent to develop and produce those nuclear arms would be better utilized in medicine and research. Investing money in production and healthcare would be wise. There is so many diseases that require to find the cure. If you want to fight, then fight, but do not pollute the environment for future generations, okay? Do we really need such devastating weapon, which leaves radiation contamination for thousands of years? I think no. Conflicts come and go, and after conflicts and wars there comes peace, former enemies become friends and allies. But nuclear weapons usage would make the war zone inhabitable, unlike the usage of conventional arms. So far, my presentation sounds way too serious, so I decided to finalize my nuclear arms race in a presentation with a couple of jokes. Question: how many survivors of a nuclear war does it take to screw a light bulb? Answer: None. People who glow in the dark don't need light bulbs. A stranger was seated next to a little 5th grade girl on an airplane when the stranger turned to her and said, "Let's talk. I have heard that flights go quicker if you strike up a conversation with your fellow passenger." The little girl, who had just opened her book, closed it slowly and said to the stranger, "What would you like to talk about, sir?" "Oh, I don't know," said the stranger. "How about nuclear power?" "Okay," she said. "That could be an interesting topic, but let me ask you a question first. A horse, a cow and a deer all eat grass, the same stuff, yet a deer excretes little pellets, while a cow turns out a flat patty and a horse produces clumps of dried glass. Why do you suppose that is?" The stranger thinks about it and says, "I have no bloody idea, I have no bloody clue. What it is?" To which the little girl replies, "Do you really feel qualified to discuss nuclear power when you don't know shit?" This is the end of my nuclear arms race video. If you have any questions, or do you have any suggestions, or you are interested to get some more videos from me about Cold War, don't hesitate to leave feedback, don't be shy to leave me a message. I always reply. I take care of my subscribers and everybody who watches my videos. And what I can say, I'm glad you stayed with me. I really hope you enjoyed my Cold War era nuclear arms race video, and please join me in my next time if you can. Bye bye. See you later.